Hi, my name is John Horne. I'm coming to you from Athens, Ohio. Thanks for checking out this video. I'm going to be sharing with you how to create walking bass lines in this video. Great skill to have if you play jazz or blues or even some western swing. Anytime you're playing in a small group situation, maybe you're the only rhythm player there, this would be a great skill to have. Even if you only use it on a couple of songs, it'd be a great skill to have. We're going to be using a 1-6-2-5 progression to do this, and I think what I'll do is I'll start by playing the example number 6. This is kind of the culmination of all the examples, so you can hear where we're going to go with this, and then we'll go back and backtrack to number 1, and I'll show you how all this stuff fits together. Okay. So again, we're using a 1-6-2-5 progression in the key of C, and here's what our example is going to sound like. Again, let me show you the chords. We're going to play a C major 9 chord. I'm going to play a A7 sharp 5, a D minor 9, and a G13, which will take you back to C. So it's just a little circle. This chord progression is used at the end of a lot of swing tunes as a turnaround. It's also an integral part of rhythm changes, something you're going to see again and again and again. And we're going to do this chord progression in such a way that each chord lasts for 2 beats. Sometimes when people see chords that happen so often as 2 beats a piece, they kind of flip out a little bit. They think, oh my goodness, how am I going to target all those chords? Actually, it's pretty easy. I think you have less chance of making a mistake when there's only 2 beats a piece than you do when you have a whole measure. Because if you get off track when there's a whole measure, it's obvious. If you only have a couple of beats a piece, then you might get off track for a second, but then you get back on track on the next chord and everything will be fine again. So let's see, anything else I need to mention? Oh yeah, I was going to tell you that the top note of all these chords, the 9s, the sharp 5, the 13, the one on the 2nd string, that's all optional. If you prefer to just play the lower 3 strings, that's fine too. And in fact, since we're focusing on bass lines at this point, you don't really need to play the chord at all, but eventually we'll want to work those in. So let me explain to you. Here's our concept. What's important to understand about walking bass lines is that you're going to start 99.9% of the time on the root. So for the C, that's the C chord. Now the next note, I always used to be so worried about how do I choose a note that's going to fit with C and also walk me to A, the next chord. To be honest, what I eventually learned was it doesn't matter what note you play next as long as it moves smoothly to A. It doesn't really have to have any relationship whatsoever to C. It usually will, but that's not the thought process. So we have our thought process is how are we going to target the next bass note. So for example number 2, we're always going to target the bass note coming from below, and we're always going to use a note that's in the key of C. Our one exception to that is on the A7, we're going to use a C sharp because C sharp is part of that chord. It's part of sort of the key of the moment, if you will. If we use the C natural, it wouldn't sound so good. So we'll use a note that's in the chord, okay? So here we are approaching from below each time. I'm playing C, then G comes from below and lands on the A, right? What's next? C sharp comes from below, lands on the D. Then I'm going to go down to an F, which comes from below the G, and finally a B comes from below and lands on C. So it's really about how you step to each chord. Again, we're always coming from below. So here's example 2. From below, from below. Let's do that again. Go on to example number 3. This one we're always coming from above. So we'll have C, A, we're going to come at it from above, so we're going to play a B. From D, we want to come above, so we'll play an E natural. G from above, we'll play an A, which lands us on G. And finally, we'll play a D, which lands us on C. So it'll sound like this. Always from above. Oh, I screwed that up, but that's okay. It didn't sound bad, did it? So let me do that one more time. I'll try to stay in the key from above. I played a chromatic approach tone there. this is our next step. We're going to start using half steps from above and below. Real easy for guitar players to do. Occasionally you'll find a note that doesn't sound lovely, but it'll still work. I think a great example of that is our first note here, where again, always coming from below, but now we're only going to use half steps, 1 fret distance. So sounds great everywhere. My only one that I don't really love is that one, and it still resolves nicely, so it works. So again, crumbing from a half step or a chromatic step below. And our final example, example number 5, is coming from a half step above. This really works beautifully 90% of the time. I like to throw out figures like that, but it works well almost all the time, and we're coming from a half step above. This would be a whole other video, but for those of you who understand what the tritone substitution is, you'll see it at work in number 5. So here is approaching from a half step above. Half step above the A. E flat is a half step above the D, right? A flat is a half step above G, and D flat is a half step above C. So it sounds like. Let's see, a couple other things. Fingerings, I usually, although not always, will play the note with the same finger as what you're going to need to play the following chord with. So you can just kind of slide into that chord. Not always though, but 90% of the time that'll happen. That's pretty common. And don't worry about the rhythms that I'm using on top. Sometimes I kind of like to play the chord on the offbeat. We'll talk more about how to vary the rhythms later on. So finally, getting back to example number 6, we've got this. I'll try to play it as written. Honestly, it's kind of hard for me to play it as written because, like a lot of guitar players, I'm used to just kind of improvising my way between chords, creating these bass lines on the fly. And if you do each one of these examples with this chord progression or a couple others that you like, I think that you'll be able to do it just as easily. Okay? So one more time, here's example 6. Show you the ending in another video, okay? So please practice that. We have a couple more videos. I plan to show you how to do this over 4 beats a measure, which includes using a lot more chromaticism, and then also how to put this into a song, so we'll use a blues for that. So you can play a walking bass line all the way through a blues progression, and I'll show you some different techniques along the way. Hope to see you in the future videos. Thanks so much.